Hi, this is Danny Doyle, and I am here with the traditional, or I guess this is the second time that I've done this, so I'm making it a tradition now. Traditional tiering of the units, not a tier list, because I do not think that ranking people based on 0% growths is a productive way to talk about them, but just sort of dividing them into tiers based on how useful they were in the playthrough and how useful I think they would be in general in 0% growths if I had used them optimally. Because there's a couple of units who I definitely didn't use to their fullest potential, although I'm not sure how much that would change them. First off, Sigurd. I think just like in every fucking genealogy tier list, automatic S tier. He is one of the best units in Fire Emblem, and losing his growths does definitely hurt him, especially in chapters like late chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5. I ended up relying more on other units who had like either better promo bonuses, because he doesn't get promo bonuses, so he doesn't ever change from how he is in chapter 1, or who could just use a holy weapon like Forseti or Ufel, or the killer bow might as well be a fucking holy weapon. But I do still think that, like, you put the brave sword on him, you put all the rings on him, it's sort of a rich get richer situation. Slightly worse than in vanilla, but not enough to discount the, like, raw power and perfect availability that he brings to the table. Speaking of units with perfect availability, Noish, availability in Kanto is really, like, all he's got going for him. Even by chapter 2, he'd fallen off to the point where he could do some, like, chip damage, but I don't know. I think maybe, like, low C, high D, he was not very good. The higher strength, like, of the two Christmas calves, he was definitely the better. Just talk about them both at the same time, because Alec is basically just Noish, but he doubles and deals 0 damage twice. Whereas Noish would deal like 4 or 5 damage. Honestly, I feel like I just wasted time dragging them around with me. They were not very good, and I know that there are ways you can make them good in vanilla, with the pursuit ring, or get them to promotion and magic swords, or even just like, I mean, they have Kanto. They should be good in terms of, like, give them a couple of stat booster rings and maybe they'll keep up. But that's not an option in 0% growths, and they were just, like, if you can keep up but you have no combat, what are you doing? Of course, if you have no combat and you can't keep up, you're just automatic F tier. Arden was just the default RNG manipulator, and honestly, if I wanted to, like, pick who would be the best RNG manipulator, Arden wouldn't even be the best RNG manipulator because he has Vantage. So there's sometimes in the arena, like, if I had the RN string and I wanted to get a specific one, if I wanted to, like, really, really rig things and just have access to all of that, I would not be able to just burn exactly 1 RN with Arden, because Vantage fucks you out of that and you always burn 2, because he attacks and then he gets attacked. So that was just like a slight tangent about why Arden is even worse than another worthless unit like Alec and Noish. If, like, he can't even burn RNs properly. It's so fucking garbage. Now comes to the unit that... This was my biggest disappointment. I didn't expect much out of him, because in a vanilla playthrough, that's kind of what happens with him as well is you do stuff with him in the prologue, and then that's it. He hits on resistance. That's good because nobody has resistance, and he has pursuit, but his speed is so low. Like, he can only double enemies that have negative AS, which there is negative AS in this game, so that's good. But I couldn't get him to a horse. I tried feeding kills to him, or feeding experience to him with Chagall, but, like, that just wasn't worth it. I hate to put him in D tier. I feel like you could potentially do stuff with the Zell if you knew what you were doing. Like, people who know more about this game than me. I'll put him at the top of D tier because of his potential, but I did not see. Maybe I'm biased by my own playthrough, but like I just didn't see any progress from him. But his friend Lex, oh boy, Lex was the first half of the playthrough. He joined with better stats than Sigurd. Actually, I'm tempted to put him above Sigurd, because Siege Utility is not as big of a deal in Generation 1 as it is Gen 2. Yeah, he joins with better stats than Sigurd, and he gets promotion bonuses, and he gets them very quickly because of Paragon. No pursuit is a problem, but the Brave Axe fixes that problem. His accuracy is kind of garbo. The Brave Axe does some amount to fix that. He has better bulk than Sigurd. Yeah, I think the top of S tier right now is where he belongs. Like, I was so sad when he died. He does end up falling off, and Sigurd sort of takes over by getting Tearfang, and once you get the critical Brave Sword, it's just sort of... yeah, maybe the late game contributions outshine the advantage Lex has early. The fact that I'm debating between the two of them should tell you just how good Lex is, though, because in a normal playthrough, that's something you would never... Like, Lex being even close to on par with Sigurd, you would never consider. He's phenomenal, don't get me wrong. But in a Growth's playthrough, Sigurd just stomps the floor with Lex. Whereas here, Lex getting those extra stats, having like exclusive access to the Brave Axe, which yes, you get the Brave Sword for Sigurd too. You get the Brave Axe earlier, you get it in Chapter 1. I don't think you get the Brave Sword until Chapter 3, and even then, you have to trade it around to get it on Sigurd, because it ends up on Ira, naturally. So yeah, I do think that Sigurd is better, just because in Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, like, having the leg ring, having all the stat boosters, which I know you could give those to Lex, but because of inheritance, you really don't want to. You want those on Sigurd, because you want them to go to Seliph. So it just, they're, like, more free for Sigurd. I do think that Chapter 4 and 5 make Sigurd better than Lex, even in a 0% context, but it's close. Quan, easy A tier. He is Sigurd number 2 who leaves after Chapter 3. Not having pursuit is rough, but, you know, you can just Silver Lance things. It is frustrating how late you get the Gaybold, but I'm not going to count that against him. And he can still use it once you have it, unlike just one-shotting pirates and shit. But yeah, Silver Lance or Brave Lance. He's just another Sigurd. I think he's only A tier instead of S tier because he leaves after Chapter 3, and like I value availability pretty highly. That said, he doesn't go through the arc of like not being quite good enough that he would. Like, if he stuck around in Chapter 4 and 5, he'd be helpful, but he would be out. Well, I guess if he had the Gable, he would be really fucking helpful. So yeah, it sucks not having him. I forgot that he, like, that's how unimpactful the Gaybolg is. He has it for so short that I just forgot about it existing. Another A tier, held back, again, purely because of availability, Ethelene. Mounted healer, and she is your only mounted healer until you promote Ratchasis, which, I mean, I ground her up, but in a vanilla context, I think she would be your only mounted healer for longer. Yes, only having C-stabs sucks, but, like, you get mend with C-stabs. What else do you need? It's, her magic is garbage, but, like, her magic's pretty bad in vanilla as well. And, like, you can fix that with mend. Mend is just such a generous staff. It's kind of funny, like, recover. You can't put recover on the low magical units. You can only put it on units who already have high magic, so mend and possibly even heal would be enough for them. I guess potentially leaf. I'm getting distracted. Tangents, ADHD, all that fun stuff. But yeah, Ethelene, very, very good. Do I put Finn in B or A? So he is statistically really fucking bad because he's a growths unit. But he's the only way in Generation 1 to use Miracle. And I think that counts for something. Like, that's how I beat the Cross Knight section, is just Miracle abusing. And if I were better at Fire Emblem, I could have done a lot more work with Miracle. He gets the Brave Lance for free. I don't think that should count in his favor. I ultimately think, actually, it's better on Quan. I left it on him because Generation 2. I did also give him a lot of favoritism because I wanted him promoted for Generation 2. And I don't know if that should be counted against him. I think B is probably fine for him, simply because his stats are so fucking garbage, even after promotion. And again, the availability is a big deal as well. Miracle, he brings a lot to the table with Miracle. Is it enough to push him from C to... I think it is enough to push him from C to B. Midir, I think D tier. Above Azel, because Horse can attack from 2 range. So theoretically, in a vanilla playthrough, I could have given the Killer Bow to Midir. And that would have... Even outside of vanilla, I could have given the Killer Bow to Midir. The reason that I didn't, and this does sort of get into Jamka as well, but you do... Like, yes, unit-to-unit comparisons are not the only thing to look at, but when it comes to who to give a specific weapon, and there's 2 candidates for that weapon, I think you do want to compare those units. Jamka uses it better because even though he doesn't have a horse, he gets sniper promotion gains, which sniper promotion gains are absolutely bonkers. And Midir just is not ever going to statistically keep up. He also doesn't really have skills other than, like, he has Canto, and I think he has a Cost, and Pursuit. But I just don't think it's worth putting the Killer Bow on Midir, so accounting for that, Midir's offense is pretty bad. Like, you either have the Iron Bow and you're dealing next to no damage, or you have the Steel Bow and you've got low accuracy. Eventually you can get the Silver Bow. I think you need to promote for the Silver Bow, though. I'm not 100% on that, and I don't feel like looking it up. But I was not impressed with Midir, and I don't know what you could do to improve him other than give him the Killer Bow, which would, in my opinion, significantly, like, overall make your army worse because you're putting the Killer Bow on a unit with worse stats. Yes, better movement, and the movement does come into effect at some times, but, like, when do you want the Killer Bow? Either for killing bosses, because you want to get crits on bosses, or for killing Pegasus Knights, and when you're killing Pegasus Knights, it's in the forest areas of Chapter 4, so it's like, the movement bonus that you get from being on a horse doesn't really help you when you're getting slowed down by the forest. I guess in chapter 3, when you fight wyverns, is really the only time I can think of that you would want a bow unit with a good bow. Where Midir would be definitely better than Jamka. But even then it's not definite because they have high defense and Midir's stats are poopy garbage. And Jamka's probably going to be promoted by then. So like the big promotion bonuses count in your favor as well. I don't know. I spent a lot of time talking about Midir. I still think he's garbage. Do not garbage. I think that gold management is a lot more in demand in Generation 2, but I still think it's worthwhile here. Maybe even better than Miracle. It's definitely B tier. I'm not sure whether, because Dew has no combat. Like, all he's doing is passing out money. But most of the time, you're passing out money to set up inheritance. And that is basically inheritance for Chapter 5. So, like, putting swords on Beowulf. Putting rings on Sigurd, which Sigurd gets a lot of those rings naturally anyway. And putting staves on Lana. And that's, or not Lana, Aideen. And that's the big one, though, is being able to give money to Aideen for staves. Plus just, like, being able to pass the Brave Sword around, being able to pass rings around. I actually, in my replay, ran short on money by just a little bit and had to fudge the inheritance. So it is very important. I actually, you know what? I've talked myself into putting Dew in A tier. He's not as good as Quan and Ethelene just because it is just money management, and it's really hard to rate money management against, like, really fucking good combat. But I do think he's better than... The Miracle utility for Generation 1 was basically just the Cross Knights, and the rest of the time it was used kind of for self-improvement, because Finn needed to proc Miracle to kill people so that he could be promoted for Gen 2. So I don't think Miracle really added as much as money management does. Aideen, staff utility, really good stat. Yeah, staff utility is really good when you don't have stats. I do think the fact that she's on foot should be counted against her. I think she's probably better than Finn. Like, Finn was basically just a key for a very specific lock, that lock being the Master Knight, the Cross Knight chapter. But Aideen was always useful, and then in Chapter 5, she got the Rescue Staff. Actually, fuck it. I think that being on foot hurts her. Being able to get A staves that she can pass... Oh, how much credit does she get for her daughter's inheritance, though? It's like a... I don't think I can give her credit for passing A staves down to her daughter, because then it works into, like, how much of that is Claude, how much of that is her, how much of that goes to Lana. Yeah. I don't think I can give her credit for the staff inheritance, but I do think she deserves credit for rescue staff, for just staff utility in general. Like just being able to physic or mend or heal is really useful when all of your units have poopy garbage stats and everyone needs a lot of heals. Iris C tier. She was very useful in Chapter 2. Like, she could just proc Astra and kill an enemy. Her stats fell off pretty quickly, and not having a horse means that she couldn't, like, chip away at units much stronger than her and then run away to safety. But I do think it's worth acknowledging that foot units having better combat than horse units means that oftentimes foot units are going to be rated higher, not than horse units necessarily. Like, yes, she's higher than 2 horse units right here, or 3 horse units right here, but these are garbage horse units. But I do think it's worth acknowledging, but she's, like, lower than these ones. But I do think foot units are going to be generally higher ranked in this context than they would be in vanilla. Because in vanilla, like, a horse gives you so much that even if you have slightly worse combat, it's just not worth it. Like, it's not it's not worth the trade-off of losing your horse to get slightly better combat. But here, when everyone is so close to just being worthless, having slightly better combat at the cost of a horse could be the difference between being worthless and being worthwhile. Deirdre is so hard to rank. Because she is good, but she's around for like one chapter. She's staff utility plus magical damage. But like, she silences one boss in basically a story event. Like, I give her some credit for that, but hardly any, because it is basically scripted. It's like saying that Ced gets credit for killing that boss in FE5. I think she's better than... I mean, if she stuck around, she'd be better than these guys, but... I value availability really high. It was nice to be able to use her as a sacrificial lamb. That was a cool piece of utility. I wish that I could do that in more than just one fucking chapter. That is something I give points to Julia for in Generation 2. But... yeah, I don't know. She's around for one chapter. If you're only around for 1/5 of the game, there's only so high I can rank you. I think maybe, like, the middle of D tier. Jamka. Oh my god. I think he's our next S tier unit, just because... like, he's lower than Sigurd and Lex, even though he's a better boss killer. And he probably did more combat overall. Like, his stats, at least in the late game, his stats were ridiculous because of promotion bonuses. But not having a horse and being locked to 2 range are bad. Like, I mean, that's Fire Emblem 101. Archers are not generally good units in enemy phase intensive games, and Genealogy is an enemy intensive game. I do my best to turn it into a player phase one because 0% growths, my units don't really survive on enemy phase. But yeah, I don't think I can rank him higher than Lex and Sigurd. I do think he's worthy of S tier though. Like, I could have beaten the game without him, but it would have been so much more annoying. Certain boss kills would have just been like... I couldn't just throw Jamka with the killer bow at it and hope for a crit. Holin, better than Ira. Is he better than Finn? Like, Finn... I'm not super satisfied with Finn's placement. Because I don't think Holin deserves B tier, necessarily. Because I don't think he's a tier's worth better than Ira. But I also don't think Finn is better than Holin. Because Holin's around... well, Holin's around for about the same amount of time as Finn. But it's a harder portion of the game. It's the second half of Gen 1 instead of the first half. And Holin performs better in general. He has swords which are good, but he's fighting with Sigurd over the singular brave sword, and Sigurd wins every time. I mean, there are enough good swords to go around, though. I think Sigurd actually spent a lot of time with the silver sword, not the brave sword. Yeah. I'll put him right here. No, I'll put him here, actually. Because being on foot did mean that he lagged behind quite a bit. Like, in Chapter 5 in particular, being on foot was a pretty big detriment, because that was a chapter that really, really wanted you to, like, go fast to deal with both groups of cavaliers, like the axe group and the bow group. Chapter 4, less so, but Chapter 4 kind of just got trivialized by Forsetti and bows. So yeah, I think maybe C tier. I think that he is better than Ira because he's got only slightly shorter availability and just better stats. And Luna and Astra are both just sort of auto kills, so I count them as functionally the same. Ratchet says I'm putting at the top of A, which is a weird place for her, because she's usually automatic S tier, and I'll be honest, when I started the playthrough, I thought that's where she would end up as well. But her combat stats did not hold up. Master Knight promotion bonuses are good, but they were not good enough. Like, it turns out some of those 20 levels, getting some stats are part of why she's good when she's promoted. That said, she is a mounted staff user who joins just in time to replace Ethelene. I mean, because I ground her up, she's a little bit early to replace Ethelene, but, like, I'm never going to say no to a mounted staff user. And when talking about Aideen, and to a lesser extent Ethelene, I talked about how important staff utility is in this game. Or not in this game, in this context, in 0% growths. And I think that goes even more so for the late game, which is the point where Etheline's not around. Like, in Chapter 4 and 5, you need to be topped off in order to take a hit. And sometimes even then you can't take a hit, which does diminish the usefulness of staffs. But I think she's still worthy of A tier just for the staff utility. Plus, I'll give her some credit for the Eldigan story stuff, where she stops you from having to face a holy weapon in Chapter fucking 3. Beowulf was kind of garbage. He had a horse so he could keep up, but he wasn't really... I guess, like, his combat is probably, like, decent enough to make the horse... He's at least better than Ira. I don't know about Holland, but he's at least better than Ira. He was hard to get to promotion, though, because he joins later, and while he is able to do, like, hit-and-run Kanto stuff, at that point, you're fighting with 4 units over swords now. Holland, Ira, Sigurd, and Beowulf all want swords. Possibly Ratchasus as well, but I was fine with her having non-sword weapons. And his stats just, like, were disappointing. So yeah, I think middle of C tier is probably fine. Lewin, I mean, recency bias wants me to rate him a lot higher, because Forsetti was a big deal in Chapter 4 for dealing with, like, the girl boss squad, a big deal in Chapter 5 for boss kills, but you don't get Forsetti for too long in Gen 1. And prior to that, like, well, he is hitting on resistance, but he's not as dodgy as I remembered him being, probably because he never grew speed. So he loses a lot of his bulk because of that. I think the hitting on resistance counts for something. I think 1-2 range counts for something. I think Forsetti counts for something, but, like, if he had Forsetti the entire game, I might put him in A tier. But because he doesn't, like... I mean, no, if he had Forsetti the entire game, I would definitely put him in S tier. If he got Forsetti, like, the beginning of Chapter 4 instead of the end of it, I might put him in A tier. But I do think just, like, 1 castle plus 1 chapter, and it's a very short chapter, too. Chapter 5 is very short. Like, Chapter 5 is much more about the story than the gameplay. You fight off 2 squads in the beginning, and you're under pressure from the start, but he can't really help out there because he doesn't have the movement. And he gets wrecked by Brave Axes and Brave Bows. Like, you want enemy phase units for the beginning of Chapter 5, and he's just not one. I think I've talked myself into putting him lower than Finn, because while Finn, like, unlocks the Cross Knights and nothing else, he's helpful in Chapter 1. He's decently helpful in Chapter 2. Like, it's hard to decide how much of that is self-improvement and how much of it is him actually being helpful. But, like, he has high availability, and he is actually useful during that time. Sylvia, dancer, I feel like automatic S tier. She joins pretty late, but she's a 4-way dancer. In a context where some of the units that you want to, like, where you're not pressing your advantage and moving 12 squares with a cavalier. So her being on foot does not hurt her as much because you can't afford to be as aggressive in general. Yeah, I don't have too much more to say. I think that she is worse than the Generation 2 dancer, but not by much. She's still a 4-way dancer, and you're still playing at a pace where she can usually keep up. Because, like, I mean, look, Holland is rated higher than Beowulf. That should tell you something about the pace at which I'm moving during 0%. When I'm not under pressure, which, like, Chapter 3 and Chapter 5 are really the only times I'm under immense time pressure. Other than that, like, you can take your time. And I guess the beginning of Chapter 2, but she's not around for that anyway. But yeah, you can generally take your time and let Sylvia catch up. Aaron was decent, but, like... Actually, I'm trying to think of a time when she did much of anything. She was a sacrificial lamb in Chapter 5. She helped to keep Claude and Tiltu alive in Chapter 3, but one of the commenters actually pointed out that they are perfectly fine on their own without her. So, like, it was nice to have another unit up there, and maybe it felt like she was helping more than she actually was. But Tiltu's pretty capable, and Claude with Fortify can recover her. So I guess all that Aaron was really doing was making Fortify, like, making it so I didn't use as many Fortify uses. So C tier for saving a couple of Fortify uses, I guess. As much as I just talked about Tiltu being very good, or very capable, that's in a situation specifically set up for her. It's a choke point. She's usually not taking on more than one enemy at a time. Because of Wrath and a healer that exclusively helps her, she's able to, like, really manipulate her HP into her offense. In normal context, she's basically just there to give birth to Arthur. I don't think, like, she's an S unit in 0% growth. It's not very good. Claude runs into a similar problem as Deirdre. I think that he is better than her. He has better... Actually, when he joins, he has fucking bonkers resistance. Like, Claude was actually kind of low-key a combat unit. So I think maybe put him above Aaron. I think despite joining an entire chapter later, Claude contributed much more than her. Both through, like, stabs are very, very good in 0% growth context, and through, like, turns out he's actually a really good combat unit. A really great combat unit is Bridget, and she got UFL basically immediately, too. I think that she's here? I'm not 100% certain if that's where she belongs. She might be a little bit too high, but I don't care because that means the sisters can sit next to each other. And that's kind of satisfying from a lore perspective. But yeah, Bridget was, like, ufill.exe. The moral of the story is that snipers are really fucking good. She didn't get sniper promo gains, but she had really good bases, so she didn't necessarily need them. Like, it would have been nice, but she was a pre-promote. She was also the combat unit who joined the latest, meaning that even if she didn't have holy weapon access, she would be one of the better combat units in my army. But yeah, this is the list. I'm pretty happy with this. Like I said, Bridget might be a little bit too high. I recognize that it could be recency bias and also, like, Phil makes big numbers, but she's sitting next to her sister, so, like, who fucking cares? It's... They've been separated for long enough. They deserve to be together. I did also want to close out with sort of an announcement. There's going to be a break in between Generation 1 and Generation 2. I've actually finished the playthrough. Generation 2 is all recorded. It's not finished edited, but it is edited to a good extent. The reason that I'm stopping, however, is that, so in real life, I'm in grad school, and our summer break is coming up. It's only like a month, but during that time, I kind of want to stream something I've been meaning to do for a while, which is a level 1 playthrough of Dark Souls Remastered, the first Dark Souls, which, I mean, it's kind of 0% growth in Dark Souls when you think about it. Dark Souls and Fire Emblem are my two favorite game series, and I know that most of what has been on this channel so far has been Fire Emblem stuff, with the occasional, like, shitpost or some Elden Ring things or Deep Rock Galactic. But I do play games other than Fire Emblem, and I've been meaning to do a Soul Level 1 playthrough of Dark Souls 1 for a while. I feel like it would be exciting to stream it. I know that my girlfriend's going to be joining me for some of it to help, like, commentate and help with Dead Air. Jacob might join for a little bit as well, because he recently finished Dark Souls 1. So it'll be a grand old time. But I'm going to be using the weekends to stream that, and think that in between Generation 1 and 2 is sort of a good pausing point anyway. So it sort of works out. And then I'll start Gen 2 up either after I finish the playthrough, or it's possible that if school picks up, I'll have to put the playthrough on pause. I don't know how long it'll take me to beat, because I've never attempted Soul Level 1 before. And I am a casual scrub. If you think I'm bad at Fire Emblem, wait and see how bad I am at fucking Dark Souls. But if you want to see that, come join us. It will be, there will be sort of like stream announcements, and it's going to be a grand old time. And if you don't care for that, thank you for joining me for FE4. And have a wonderful day. And like, comment, subscribe, all the tuber things. I'm a tuber. Bye-bye.